The stars no longer twinkled like they once did. By the year 5137, space had become crowded, regulated, weaponized. The frontier of wonder had faded into corridors of politics, mining rights, military borders, and corporate corridors orbiting dead moons. But even in that cluttered sky, there were edges where silence still reigned, and Emma Calder had made a career out of dancing along them. Her ship, the Seraphim Waltz, shimmered like black glass under a twin-star system as it emerged from warp. Emma sat alone in the pilot's cradle, legs tucked beneath her in a posture that suggested meditation, but her steel-gray eyes scanned her instruments with ruthless efficiency. Around her, faint blue hollows pulsed like jellyfish suspended in water. She was a woman made for the future, tall, sleek, with obsidian hair that fell in a clean sheet to her shoulders. Her face was beautiful in a way that startled people, cold, perfect, calculated. But there was a softness around her eyes that didn't belong in someone with her history. That softness was memory. And memory hurt. Waltz, stabilize orbit. Show me the beacon signal. The AI's voice responded, calm and androgynous. Signal detected. Origin, Arc Station 88 Theta. Non-standard protocol. Encrypted. Emma's jaw tightened. Arc stations hadn't transmitted in decades. Most were derelict. Some were rumored to harbor old military AI, or worse, failed consciousness transfer experiments. And yet this one pulsed, quietly but insistently, like a heartbeat beneath the skin of space. Decrypt and route visuals to bridge, she ordered. The holoflux shifted, revealing a grainy image, a cold, massive orbital ring, half buried in the shadow of a gas giant. It looked like a metal crown fallen from a god's head and left to rust among the moons. Flickers of movement glinted in the structure's interior, or perhaps it was simply malfunctioning lights. Either way, it made the skin on Emma's arms prickle. She rose, her boots magnetizing to the floor with a quiet hiss. Her flight suit, a tight weave of dark navy and silver nanofabric, adjusted to her movement. A sidearm was already clipped to her hip. She didn't trust stations this old. No one with sense did. Why now? She muttered. Why wake up after all this time? She accessed the last known logs of Station 88 Theta. They were sparse. Most of the data had been redacted or corrupted beyond repair. But one phrase repeated in the remnants. Project Threnody must not fall into the wrong hands. She stared at the words as if they might explain themselves. Then she made her decision. Prep the drop shuttle. I'm going in. As the shuttle detached from Seraphim Waltz and plunged silently toward the broken halo of the Ark, Emma didn't look back. She never did. Her past was filled with things she didn't want to see. People she'd lost, horrors she'd walked away from, promises she'd buried under the cold logic of survival. But as the vast shape of the ancient station filled her viewport, her hand unconsciously touched the small locket hidden beneath her collar. For a second, the mask slipped. Her breath hitched. Then she straightened her shoulders, turned on the shuttle's internal cam, and whispered, Emma Calder, Salvage License 5. 213. Mission. Investigate signal origin at Arc 88 Theta. Her eyes narrowed. And if Project Threnody is still alive, I'll finish what they started. And with that, the shuttle vanished into the black throat of the station, into silence, into memory, and into whatever still dreamed behind the sealed doors of the past. Asterisk, the stars no longer twinkled like they once did. By the year 5137, space had become crowded, regulated, weaponized. The frontier of wonder had faded into corridors of politics, mining rights, military borders, and corporate corridors orbiting dead moons. But even in that cluttered sky, there were edges where silence still reigned, and Emma Calder had made a career out of dancing along them. Her ship, the Seraphim Waltz, shimmered like black glass under a twin-star system as it emerged from warp. Emma sat alone in the pilot's cradle, legs tucked beneath her in a posture that suggested meditation, but her steel-gray eyes scanned her instruments with ruthless efficiency. Around her, faint blue hollows pulsed like jellyfish suspended in water. She was a woman made for the future, tall, sleek, with obsidian hair that fell in a clean sheet to her shoulders. Her face was beautiful in a way that startled people, cold, perfect, calculated. But there was a softness around her eyes that didn't belong in someone with her history. That softness was memory. And memory hurt. Waltz, stabilize orbit. Show me the beacon signal. The AI's voice responded, calm and androgynous. Signal detected. Origin. Arc Station 88 Theta. Non-standard protocol. Encrypted. Emma's jaw tightened. Arc stations hadn't transmitted in decades. Most were derelict. Some were rumored to harbor old military AI, or worse, failed consciousness transfer experiments. And yet this one pulsed, quietly but insistently, like a heartbeat beneath the skin of space. Decrypt and route visuals to bridge, she ordered. The holoflux shifted, revealing a grainy image, a cold, massive orbital ring, half buried in the shadow of a gas giant. It looked like a metal crown fallen from a god's head and left to rust among the moons. Flickers of movement glinted in the structure's interior, or perhaps it was simply malfunctioning lights. Either way, it made the skin on Emma's arms prickle. She rose, her boots magnetizing to the floor with a quiet hiss. Her flight suit, a tight weave of dark navy and silver nanofabric, adjusted to her movement. A sidearm was already clipped to her hip. She didn't trust stations this old. No one with sense did. Why now? She muttered. Why wake up after all this time? She accessed the last known logs of Station 88 Theta. They were sparse. Most of the data had been redacted or corrupted beyond repair. But one phrase repeated in the remnants. Project Threnody must not fall into the wrong hands. She stared at the words as if they might explain themselves. Then she made her decision. Prep the drop shuttle. I'm going in. As the shuttle detached from Seraphim Waltz and plunged silently toward the broken halo of the Ark, Emma didn't look back. She never did. Her past was filled with things she didn't want to see. People she'd lost, horrors she'd walked away from, promises she'd buried under the cold logic of survival. But as the vast shape of the ancient station filled her viewport, her hand unconsciously touched the small locket hidden beneath her collar. For a second, the mask slipped. Her breath hitched. Then she straightened her shoulders, turned on the shuttle's internal cam, and whispered, Emma Calder, Salvage License 5. 213. Mission. Investigate signal origin at Arc 88 Theta. Her eyes narrowed. And if Project Threnody is still alive, I'll finish what they started. And with that, the shuttle vanished into the black throat of the station, into silence, into memory, and into whatever still dreamed behind the sealed doors of the past. The hours after the Veralia encounter pass in silence aboard the Solstice VI. Silence not of peace, but of weight. Emma rests her hands on the control panel of the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the swirling kaleidoscope of deep space. Outside, the twin stars of the Verdun system burn cold and blue, casting long silver streaks across the hull. The rest of the crew avoids speaking about what happened. Dr. Aidan Brooks has sealed himself in the medbay, studying the Veralia residue that clung to their ship like pollen to windshields. Technician Lisa Mercer remains buried in the subdeck, her fingers trembling every time she rewires the navigation stabilizers. And Lieutenant Rilland? He hasn't said a word since returning from the surface of Genora. But Emma can't look away from the stars. Not after what she saw. It wasn't just a Veralia. It was communication. The creature didn't attack them. It studied them, judged them, And just before it vanished in a ripple of colorless energy, it whispered into her thoughts with no mouth or sound. This system is dying. The fracture comes. Now, Emma can't forget it. Not even in sleep. The tremor hits the ship at 0300 hours. A soundless shockwave, like a ripple through the fabric of space-time itself. Every sensor screams. The solstice V spins 30 degrees on its axis. Artificial gravity shudders. Report. Emma shouts, her voice cutting through the klaxons as red lights strobe. It's not a physical object, Rilland says from the command chair, gripping the arms. Something just fractured ... something huge. Brooks bursts into the bridge, his white coat flaring behind him. I picked it up first through the bioresonance monitors. It wasn't matter, it was space folding in on itself. Lisa's voice crackles over comes. The stars, they're wrong. I'm feeding it to your display now. The star chart updates, and then silence again, because the Veridan system has shifted. A third star now floats in the quadrant. Black, perfectly. Spherical, like a puncture in the sky. It emits no heat, no light, no gravity. And yet systems across the ship begin to fail in waves as the anomaly grows. Emma grips the edge of the console. The fracture comes. Was this what the Varelia meant? Later that cycle, a probe is launched. It doesn't return instead. Sends back one frame of corrupted footage. A silhouette of something humanoid, standing at the edge of the black star, wrapped in ribbons of shadow and glowing circuitry. The thing turns toward the probe, and smiles. Emma watches the transmission over and over. The others want to leave. Rilland insists they jump to Arcus Colony and call for command support. But Emma knows this anomaly wasn't chance. It was waiting for them, watching. This ... isn't a black hole, she murmurs, her voice hollow. It's a doorway. Lisa frowns. To what? Emma doesn't answer, but in her mind, the Varelia's whisper returns, like breath on the back of her neck. We tried to seal it. You opened it. And far out in space, the third star pulses once as if responding to her . And somewhere within that fracture ... something is waking . The silence of the Solace Dawn's bridge was not the calm of peace, but the kind of quiet that follows a scream a moment too loud in its absence. Emma stood by the main viewport, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Outside, the stars glistened like frozen tears, smeared across the black canvas of space. Her breath was calm, but her mind churned. It had been 2 days since they lost communication with the terraforming crew on Eridani Prime, a colony with 312 people, scientists, engineers, families, gone dark. No emergency beacon, no distress call, just ... vanishing. The ship AI, Arden, broke the silence. Commander Emma Ross, we've received an anomalous signal originating from Eridani Prime. Unencrypted, minimal power usage. It repeats every 19.2 seconds. Emma turned sharply. Play it. A burst of static, then a single human voice garbled but unmistakably human. They're ... underneath. We thought it was the core, but they were always here. Don't. The signal cut. The room fell back into its uneasy stillness. Lieutenant Mark Delaney looked up from the navigation console. That's Andrews. He was the lead geologist down there. Emma's eyes narrowed. She walked across the bridge and leaned over Mark's shoulder. Location? He tapped the screen. Deep within the cavernous crater? That's odd. It was supposed to be tectonically stable. There were no expected seismic activities. Emma looked at the data overlay. A strange heat signature pulsed beneath the crust, almost like a heartbeat. Her lips pressed into a tight line. We're not leaving them behind. Mark turned too. Her hesitant. Emma, We don't know what's down there." That signal sounded like a warning. She didn't look at him. It also sounded like someone asking for help. She moved toward the central display, calling up the colony's layout. We land at the secondary platform, 6 clicks from the crater. Quiet insertion. Only me, Mark, and Dr. Sasha Green. The rest stay in orbit. Sasha, sitting quietly until now, looked up. Her voice was measured, but a note of fear slipped through. We scanned for life signs and found none. If that signal is coming from a dead zone, then what are we really walking into? Emma met her gaze. Something we should have found before sending people there. She paused, then added, and something we need to face. If we don't understand what happened here, we risk sending more into the same fate. The descent craft hummed with restrained power as they departed the Solace Dawn. The closer they got to Eridani Prime, the more they felt the weight of isolation. The atmosphere was breathable, but barely. Ash clung to the clouds, and the terrain once lush with bioengineered flora was withered and blackened, as if something below had poisoned the planet from the roots. When they reached the colony, perimeter, the silence was worse than any battle Emma had ever fought. No bodies, no blood, just empty corridors. Half-eaten meals on tables. A child's drawing fluttering in the wind. Then they saw the breach. The earth at the edge of the crater had ruptured, forming an unnatural chasm that pulsed faintly with a bioluminescent blue glow. Machinery lay twisted and melted nearby, as if torn apart from the inside. Sasha crouched near the edge, scanning with her handheld. These readings are ... impossible. It's not just geothermal energy. It's single quotes S ... intelligent, like it's communicating, but not in any language I can parse. A low hum began, vibrating through the soles of their boots. Emma drew her sidearm instinctively. "Time to move," she said. "Whatever sent that signal, whatever answered, it is waiting." She glanced at the pulsing depths of the crater, and in that moment she felt it not fear, not excitement, but recognition. Like something was looking back at her dot, something ancient and awake. The descent into the abyss was slower than expected. The narrow shuttle, designed for precision, plunged silently through the thickening mists that rose from the crater's edge. Emma felt the chill of Eridani Prime's poisoned air press against the reinforced glass of the cockpit, a reminder that even here, life fought to cling. Below them, the glowing blue light throbbed steadily like a heartbeat buried deep beneath the world's cracked surface. Emma, Mark, and Dr. Sasha Green sat. Intense silence. The only sounds the hum of life support and the occasional beep of instruments registering unusual electromagnetic activity. The shuttle landed on an ancient platform, half swallowed by jagged rock and encroaching bioluminescent fungi that seemed to pulse in time with the mysterious signal. The airlock hissed open. Emma led the way, boots crunching softly on a carpet of strange, glowing moss that clung to the metal floor. The cavernous tunnel ahead was vast, far larger than the natural crust. Above should allow its walls, shimmering with veins of a translucent mineral that caught their flashlights and scattered spectral fragments into the darkness. "This isn't just a cave," Sasha whispered, voice trembling. "It's a constructed space, ancient and alive." Emma nodded but kept her gaze sharp. "Keep your eyes open. We don't know what's down here." The signal grew louder, an eerie mix of whispers and fractured tones that seemed to crawl along the walls. It wasn't language, not in any form she recognized, but it was purposeful, like a message folded in shadows. They followed the winding tunnel for what felt like hours. The atmosphere grew heavy, the gravity subtly fluctuating, their suits compensating with soft mechanical adjustments. At the tunnel's heart, they found it, a vast cavern, open to the stars through a jagged rift in the planet's crust, revealed. the dark void above a glimpse of the cosmos framed by raw rock and crystalline growths. But dominating the chamber was a massive structure, an immense, spiraling obelisk of black metal and glowing circuitry. It pulsed with the same blue light that had guided them, throbbing like the core of some colossal, living engine. Emma approached. Cautiously, her fingers grazing the surface. The obelisk was warm to the touch, vibrating faintly as if aware of their presence. Suddenly, the chamber trembled. From the shadows emerged a figure. Tall, elegant, with skin the color of starlight and eyes that burned like liquid sapphire. The being's presence was overwhelming, both alien and hauntingly familiar. A voice echoed inside Emma's mind, soft yet commanding. You should not have come. The fracture grows. The old world dies to give birth to the new. Emma swallowed. Hard. Who? Or what are you? The figure's gaze pierced her soul. I am the Watcher, guardian of the threshold, the bridge between worlds. You seek answers, but the price of knowledge is sacrifice. Mark stepped forward, weapon raised. We're not here to fight. We want to help. The Watcher's eyes flickered with ancient sorrow. Help? The colony was a seed, planted to test the resilience of life. But beneath the surface, the darkness stirs. The fracture is a wound in the fabric of existence, and it bleeds into your world. Emma's mind raced. How do we stop it? The Watcher's form shimmered, and the obelisk flared with blinding light. Visions flooded Emma's mind, images of collapsing stars, dying civilizations, and a vast cosmic entity devouring realities. The voice whispered again, now tinged with desperation. The fracture cannot be healed by force, only by balance. You must decide what you are willing to lose, and what must live. As the light faded, Emma found herself alone in the chamber once more. The obelisk's pulse slowed, its glow dimming to a faint heartbeat. She looked to Mark and Sasha, who stared back with wide eyes. The weight of the Watcher's words hung heavy in the air. Emma whispered, This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about choice, and the future of everything. Asterisk, the Oscillaris dropped into orbit around the fourth planet of the system, a dusky, silver-hued world cloaked in endless twilight. Emma stood by the observation window in the command deck, her fingers resting gently on the edge of the glass, her eyes locked on the planet below. A haunting haze danced over its atmosphere, veiling it in spectral beauty. The planet was unnamed on most charts, designated only as X47b, yet in the fractured logbooks they'd recovered from the radiant memory, it was repeatedly referred to as the Vault. Radiation levels are unstable, but manageable, reported. Anders from the console, his voice clipped and focused. No life signs, but the magnetic field is ... wrong. It's fluctuating like it's trying to mimic something. Emma turned slightly, brow furrowed. Like it's intelligent? He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. They descended in the drop shuttle, Emma, Anders, Devon, and a young communications officer named Isla. The shuttle's hull trembled as it breached the atmosphere, a pale blue storm swirling in the stratosphere like a living serpent. The terrain below was metallic in sheen, ridged like ancient scars carved into the earth by something colossal. Nothing grew here. Nothing breathed. Yet the place felt alive. They landed near the mouth of a colossal crater, its rim like shattered glass, edges sharp and unnatural. A soft thrumming rose beneath their boots the moment they stepped onto the surface. Emma glanced around. Does anyone hear that? Not sound, murmured Isla. It's in my skull. Inside the crater was a structure circular, vast, and partially buried. Its surface was obsidian black, broken only by lines of pulsing violet light. The architecture resembled no known culture. The design was fluid, unnatural, as if poured into existence rather than built. Emma felt the hairs rise on her arms. They made their way to what appeared to be an entrance. The door, or what passed for one, was already ajar, just wide enough for them to slip through. Devon aimed his light down the hall. The beam barely penetrated the gloom, swallowed whole by shadows. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The walls were covered in shifting patterns, moving like oil on water. Every few feet, the corridor emitted a subtle whisper-like breath over bone. Then came the voice, Emma. It wasn't heard. It was felt as if the word were breathed directly into her bloodstream. She turned sharply. No one else reacted. No one else heard it. Keep moving, she said, steadying her voice. They reached a central chamber, a vast dome filled with concentric circles of suspended platforms, each inscribed with alien glyphs. In the center floated an orb, rotating slowly, casting pale white light that shimmered like broken stars. Emma stepped forward. The orb responded. A cascade of images flooded her mind, visions of cities built inside comets, creatures that spoke in colors, humans shackled in temples. Of thought, and something far worse, a presence watching through the blackness between galaxies. Something with no name and too many eyes. She staggered back, clutching her head. Anders caught her. Emma, what is it? I saw. Memory, she gasped. This isn't a vault for technology. It's a mind. This place stores what a species once was before it was erased. Devon looked pale. You mean we're standing in a graveyard? Emma nodded. No, worse, a mirror. One that shows what we might become if we don't stop what's coming. Behind them, the passageway shifted. The patterns on the walls began to glow red. The air vibrated. Something deep below the structure had awakened. We need to leave. Emma said, now. As they rushed toward the exit, Emma looked back at the orb. For a moment, she saw her own face reflected in its surface, but aged, haunted, and alone in darkness. Then the floor cracked open beneath it. The whisper returned. You were always part of us. They escaped as the vault began to collapse in on itself, folding like a dying star. The shuttle barely cleared the crater before the structure vanished beneath the surface, as if swallowing itself. Back aboard the Ocellaris, Emma stood in silence in her quarters, staring at her reflection. The voice still lingered, not a threat, but a memory, a warning. In the void, nothing truly dies. It only waits. The hangar was dimly lit, illuminated only by flickering emergency lights that washed the metallic surfaces in shifting hues of amber and crimson. The Isadora was eerily quiet. Systems were running on minimal power, and the ship's artificial intelligence, Alan, had gone silent following the incident near the Viridian Rift. Emma's boots echoed on the floor as she moved through the corridor with deliberate caution. Her pulse steady despite the growing tension in her chest. She wasn't alone. Earlier, in the crew mess hall, she'd caught the reflection of a figure in a dark, rippling void behind the food prep station there for only a second, then gone. Her team had dismissed it as post-jump disorientation. They hadn't seen what she had, and they hadn't heard the voice. That voice. It had spoken to her through the static of the comms system during diagnostics. Emma. We remember your fire. Now, alone in the lower deck to investigate a sudden temperature drop, Emma's breath curled visibly in the frigid air. She reached the maintenance panel, can unlock the cover. Steam hissed out as the access slid open, but inside there were no faulty relays or ruptured pipes. Instead, strange marks had been etched into the steel walls. They were too precise for human hands, symmetrical yet unnerving, like glyphs from a forgotten language. As she leaned closer, the panel lighting surged suddenly, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. Emma stepped back. Then the whisper returned. No comms, no radio dot directly into her mind. "You are being watched, Emma." She stumbled back, drawing her sidearm, aiming it down the corridor. Nothing. The lights flickered again, but now the hallway stretched longer than it had before distorted, as if the ship was subtly, impossibly rearranging itself. Emma backed into the nearest secured lab and locked the door. Her hands were shaking now. On the display wall inside, the last sensor feed from their approach to the rift was looping. But the crew hadn't noticed what Emma now paused on frame-by-frame dot in the distant black of space, just beyond their ship's path. A silhouette. A figure, tall and narrow, with glowing white eyes. Watching Dot, she froze. Not only had this figure been there during the jump, it had moved as the frames progressed. From far to near Dot suddenly, the ship's lights surged to full power. A.L. Ein's voice returned, but broken, glitching. Ma, we... They are INSI. The feed cut. Total darkness. A hand touched her shoulder. Emma whirled around, weapon raised, but there was no one. Only her reflection in the lab's glass viewport. Except her reflection was still staring back. Half a second too long after she turned away, Dot. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat in the observation deck, eyes locked on the stars. The crew believed the rift had left them physically unscathed, but Emma now knew that something had come through with them, and it wasn't done watching. Asterisk. The silence of deep space was absolute. No wind, no breath, no rustle of life. Just the hum of the Aurora Sentinel systems, faintly vibrating through the soles of Emma's boots. Outside the observation bay, a shimmering corridor of violet light arched like a god's eyelash across the void. The rim of Eos, a naturally occurring gravitational lens shaped by a collapsed star and a string of dark matter satellites human-made. Forgotten. Emma stood alone, arms folded behind her back. Her reflection in the glass flickered occasionally, fractured by the electromagnetic pulses the lens emitted. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes tracked the slow drift of a ghost ship, the Calypso, now nothing more than a drifting hulk silhouetted in Eos's radiance. How long since they went silent? She asked Dot behind her. Commander Nash, tall and gray-stubbled, hesitated before replying. 2 weeks. No distress signal. No biosigns either. At least not human. Emma's jaw tightened. The Calypso had once been a research vessel specializing in extra-dimensional phenomena. That it had made it this deep into uncharted territory without a tether to the core worlds was disturbing. That it had ended up here, near the rim of Eos, was more than coincidence. Send out the tether drone. I want hard visuals inside the hull within the hour. Nash nodded and turned away, but Emma kept her eyes on the drifting vessel. Somewhere deep in her memory, a whisper stirred. Not a voice, but a pattern. Familiar, as if she'd seen the Calypso before. In dreams? In recovered memory files from the Arcadian collapse? She didn't know. She only knew one thing. They were no longer just explorers. They were trespassers on a map the universe had drawn in secret ink. By the time the tethered drone latched onto the Calypso, the Aurora Sentinel had gone into a state of high alert. Lights dimmed. Shields pulsed at full strength. A low-frequency hum, almost imperceptible, started echoing through the ship, an automatic anomaly response in the command chamber. Emma stood at the center halotable as ghostly blue projections of the Calypso's interior rotated slowly. The corridors were torn open from the inside, as if something had exploded outward, not inward. Objects floated in microgravity. Datapads, a shattered helmet, something resembling torn clothing, but unnaturally long and twisted. "What's that?" asked Lieutenant Wren, pointing to a dark mass, partially obscured in the med-bay. Emma tapped to enhance. The image sharpened. What emerged was a shape both familiar and monstrous, vaguely humanoid, but with extended limbs, skin etched with circuitry like veins, and eyes that glowed faint red, even though the body appeared lifeless. "One of us," Wren whispered. "No," Emma said coldly. "That thing was made in our image. But it's not human." Suddenly, the drone feed distorted. Static. Then a screech, not audible, but something deeper, something felt. Emma gasped. For a second, her vision blurred, her mind flooded with memories that weren't hers. Stars collapsing, beings of light speaking in reverse. A symbol burned into the surface of her vision like an afterimage, and then silence again. Feed cut. Emma staggered away from the holotable, her skin cold, breath uneven. Nash caught her by the shoulder. "Emma, what the hell just happened?" "I saw something," she whispered. "Not just with my eyes. It was ancient and intelligent, and it knows we're here." Wren paled. "You think it killed the crew?" Emma nodded slowly. "No, I think they invited it in, and it stayed." For the first time in weeks, fear took root in her chest. Not the fear of death, but of understanding, of knowing too much. She turned back to the viewport, where the Calypso continued to drift, as serene as a tomb in the middle of infinity. "We're not the first to come through the eye," she said, "but we might be the last to look back." The descent had taken 7 hours. Emma stood at the threshold of something ancient, something wrong. The drone's light pulsed weakly against the tunnel walls, revealing frost-slick metal and a strange curvature that did not match any mining architecture. Every step deeper into the crevice beneath the ice felt like moving down the throat of a slumbering beast. Behind her, Alex and Dana whispered nervously, the echoes of their breath fogging the masks of their thermosuits. Emma barely registered them. Her eyes were locked ahead. On the widening chamber they had stumbled into, hidden beneath 10 kilometers of frozen stone. A circular vault, perfectly symmetrical, opened before them. Emma moved slowly into the space, sweeping her beam across. Alien carvings that slithered and curled across the walls and symbols, too complex to be human, but not entirely incomprehensible, as if something had taught them or mimicked them. The air felt thinner here, even with their suits. Alex murmured readings. Atmospheric pressure anomalies, magnetic shifts, faint but persistent electromagnetic signatures. At the center of the chamber was a crystalline obelisk, tall, humming, black as the void. Emma approached it slowly. The surface shimmered, not with reflected light, but with images. They flickered like old memories, cities made of spiraling towers, starships shaped like blades, human figures walking alongside something else, tall and featureless, with eyes like molten silver. She reached out. The moment her glove touched the obelisk, it sang, not in sound, but in thought. It vibrated through her bones, her skull, her memory. She saw herself as a child, and as she was now, then, as someone else entirely, in a city she had never visited, speaking a language she did not know, on a planet with 2 suns. Emma collapsed to her knees. Dana screamed, running to her. But Emma's mind was elsewhere, thrust into a lattice of consciousness far older than humanity. Something watched her there. Something had always been watching. When she came to, Alex was shaking her. "You blacked out for 2 minutes," he said, voice trembling. "The thing. The obelisk. It responded to you. It's like it knew you were coming." Emma stared up at the vaulted ceiling, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't a ruin," she said. Dana frowned. "Then what is it?" Emma looked at them both, the realization chilling her deeper than the cold ever could. "It's a beacon." They turned to look at the obelisk again, just in time to see the carvings along the walls move, flowing like liquid metal. Something had been activated. Something ancient. Something not gone. Above them, across the frozen crust of Glees Vabe, every mining console flickered. Power grids stuttered. Communications blacked out. One by one, the stars in orbit began to disappear, swallowed by shadow. The sky was no longer safe, and the message had been sent. Emma didn't know where or to whom, but they were no longer alone, and never had been. The descent had taken 7 hours. Emma stood at the threshold of something ancient, something wrong. The drone's light pulsed weakly against the tunnel walls, revealing frost-slick metal and a strange curvature that did not match any mining architecture. Every step deeper into the crevice beneath the ice felt like moving down the throat of a slumbering beast. Behind her, Alex and Dana whispered nervously, the echoes of their breath fogging the masks of their thermosuits. Emma barely registered them. Her eyes were locked ahead. On the widening chamber they had stumbled into, hidden beneath 10 kilometers of frozen stone. A circular vault, perfectly symmetrical, opened before them. Emma moved slowly into the space, sweeping her beam across. Alien carvings that slithered and curled across the walls and symbols, too complex to be human, but not entirely incomprehensible, as if something had taught them or mimicked them. The air felt thinner here, even with their suits. Alex murmured readings. Atmospheric pressure anomalies, magnetic shifts, faint but persistent electromagnetic signatures. At the center of the chamber was a crystalline obelisk, tall, humming, black as the void. Emma approached it slowly. The surface shimmered, not with reflected light, but with images. They flickered like old memories, cities made of spiraling towers, starships shaped like blades, human figures walking alongside something else, tall and featureless, with eyes like molten silver. She reached out. The moment her glove touched the obelisk, it sang, not in sound, but in thought. It vibrated through her bones, her skull, her memory. She saw herself as a child, and as she was now, then, as someone else entirely, in a city she had never visited, speaking a language she did not know, on a planet with 2 suns. Emma collapsed to her knees. Dana screamed, running to her. But Emma's mind was elsewhere, thrust into a lattice of consciousness far older than humanity. Something watched her there. Something had always been watching. When she came to, Alex was shaking her. You blacked out for 2 minutes, he said, voice trembling. The thing ... the obelisk ... It responded to you. It's like it knew you were coming. Emma stared up at the vaulted ceiling, her voice barely a whisper. This isn't a ruin, she said. Dana frowned. Then what is it? Emma looked at them both, the realization chilling her deeper than the cold ever could. It's a beacon. They turned to look at the obelisk again, just in time to see the carvings along the walls move, flowing like liquid metal. Something had been activated. Something ancient. Something not gone. Above them, across the frozen crust of Glees Vibe, every mining console flickered. Power grids stuttered. Communications blacked out. One by one, the stars in orbit began to disappear, swallowed by shadow. The sky was no longer safe, and the message had been sent. Emma didn't know where or to whom, but they were no longer alone, and never had been. The Artemis veil glided in silence through the glowing fractures of the Terran expanse. Stars distorted and twisted as though smeared across glass. Emma stood alone at the observation deck, the universe stretched before her like a wound in reality. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the transparent hull. Tired eyes, messy hair pulled into a low braid, and the quiet intensity of someone carrying a weight no one else could see. After everything, the betrayal, the codes, the whispers. From the artifact, she had begun to see connections where before there were only mysteries. The device found on Epsilon V hadn't just been a relic. It was a message, possibly even a map. And now, the Terran expanse was reacting to it. Frequencies shifted. Gravitational waves pulsed unnaturally. Something was calling out. And Emma had finally decided to answer. She turned, voice sharp through the ship-wide intercom. "Aina, prepare the Rift drones. Full spectrum scans. I want a full readout of whatever's warping spacetime in Quadrant 7. Aina, the ship's AI, calm and clipped as always, responded instantly. Deploying drones. Warning, gravitational variance is beyond safe exploration limits. Entry into fracture space may result in irreversible consequence. Emma ignored it. Limits had stopped mattering a long time ago. Down in the drone bay, James and Darius, the last two crew members Emma trusted, were arguing again. James, ever the cautious one, was checking every line of code in the navigation subroutine. Darius, ex-military, believed in charging first and questioning later. "You seriously want to send her in there blind?" James snapped. "This isn't like docking with a black hole's edge." "This is off the map," Darius shrugged. "That girl survived worse than gravity anomalies. She's not invincible." "No," Darius said quietly, "but she's the only reason we're still breathing." Emma stepped in just as silence fell between them. "We're going," she said. "I'll pilot the lead drone manually. If there's a fracture in space-time here, I want eyes inside it." They launched at 0600 ship-time. Emma sat in the drone's cockpit pod, body linked through neural interface. It wasn't just visuals anymore. She could feel the drone, its speed, its weightless drift, the resistance of quantum strings brushing against the hull like unseen kelp in deep cosmic tides. As the drone pierced the event horizon of the rift, color disappeared. Then the stars blinked out. There was only void. And then something. Patterns. Symbols. Not visual. Not sound, but thought. Emma's mind flooded with impressions. A spiral, endless and recursive. A dying planet whispering its final breath. A voice, or maybe millions of voices layered into one, humming a frequency her bones recognized. She wasn't alone here, Doc, and this wasn't natural. The rift was artificial. A scar in space-time cut by someone or something trying to hide. Emma struggled to breathe. Her vitals spiked. Back on the Artemis Veil, Aina's voice rose sharply. "Commander, neural load is over 150%. You must disengage." But Emma couldn't. She was pulled forward, not physically, not even mentally, but gravitationally, emotionally, cosmologically. Something was showing her fragments. A city floating in a vacuum, built on the bones of titanic creatures. Machines older than the sun, still whispering equations into the dark. A mirror of herself, older, scarred, walking through flames. It all meant something. And in the final image, a symbol glowing in the dark. Emma understood. The rift was not just a fracture. It was a door. And someone or something on the other side had been waiting for her. She came to in the drone bay, collapsed on the cold metal floor. Darius had carried her back. James hovered nearby, wide-eyed, pale. "What happened in there?" he asked. Emma slowly sat up, voice hoarse. "It's not a natural anomaly. The rift, it was built a long time ago, and it's watching us now." James looked at her like she'd gone mad. "Watching us?" Emma nodded. "We weren't the first to come here, but we might be the last if we don't figure out what's behind that door." The silence after the storm was almost sacred. Emma stood at the edge of the ruined city of Andara, a cradle of ancient intelligence, now a graveyard of stars. Jagged fragments of the once glimmering alien spires jutted from scorched soil like the broken ribs of a long-dead beast. Dust hovered in the air, shimmering like the last breath of a forgotten civilization. Behind her, the surviving crew of the Horizon gathered quietly, watching her waiting. But Emma wasn't looking back. Her eyes were fixed forward on the colossal obsidian structure that now lay open before her like a wound in space itself. The obelisk, once dormant, now pulsed with a deep, red heartbeat. It had been awakened. Not by violence, not by force, but by her. And by her decision to trust the voice within. It had called her not as a weapon, but as a key. Emma descended the fractured steps into the heart of the structure, her boots echoing softly. Around her, alien glyphs shimmered to life on the walls, glowing softly with an eerie familiarity. The deeper she went, the more the symbols began to feel like memories. Not hers, but those of something older. The sentience that once ruled this place had not died, it had been waiting. In the core chamber, she found it, a sphere of liquid light hovering in midair, humming with incomprehensible intelligence. Her reflection danced on its surface, fractured and ethereal. Emma Carlyle. It said not in words, but in emotion, in memory, in pure thought. She stepped closer, feeling its warmth crawl into her skin, into her mind. Visions exploded behind her eyes, stars being born and dying, civilizations rising and collapsing, the endless rhythm of existence across galaxies. You are not a destroyer, it spoke again. You are the bridge between flesh and code, between past and the possible. Emma fell to her knees, not in fear, but in awe. For the first time since she'd entered this galaxy, she understood her purpose. The obelisk had not summoned her to stop a war. It had summoned her to guide transformation. The sentience offered her a choice. If she accepted its gift, its consciousness, she would no longer be only human. She would become part of something vast, something immortal. She would help rebuild what Andara once was, not with weapons, but with memory and will. But it came with sacrifice. She would never return to Earth, never walk among her people as one of them again. Emma closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks, not from sorrow, but from clarity. She whispered, "I accept." Light engulfed her. Outside, the crew shielded their eyes as a pillar of radiant energy burst skyward from the obelisk, tearing through clouds of ash. The ground trembled, but not in fear. It was renewal. From the ruins, green light began to pulse across the shattered landscape. The planet itself stirred, as if awakening from a nightmare. A voice echoed across their minds, not mechanical, not foreign. Emma's voice. I am here. Andara is alive. And so am I. Captain Reyes knelt, tears in his eyes. She did it. She became what none of us could. Years passed. The galaxy healed. The war ended not in fire, but in understanding. The systems once divided by fear began to send emissaries to Andara, where a figure of radiant energy, Emma, now a being of thought and memory, greeted them not as a queen, not as a god, but as a guide. They called her the Echo of Andara, but those who had known her before, those who had watched her fight, bleed, and love knew her simply as Emma, the woman who stood at the edge of extinction and chose hope. And in the stars above, her legacy shimmered an eternal light that whispered, the future was not written in blood, but in choice. And she chose life.